people have to understand how significant the AME Church was. When Richard Allen and Absalom Jones and those other men came together and created the African Methodist Episcopal Church, what they were doing was they created the first independent black denomination in the history of Christendom. And in 1816, so you had something, for the first time African Americans were saying, we're going to run a church, we're going to run a large organization. They picked the pastors, they elected the bishops, they controlled the money, they set the agenda. It was something that no one had ever seen before. And so the AME Church became very important because it was a way for African Americans who were told in this country that you're second-class citizens, that you don't have the intellectual ability to run things. It was a powerful demonstration that African Americans had incredible intelligence and that they were just as smart and just as important or just as talented as whites. And I think the AME Church was a constant reminder when people said you all aren't smart, you all can't run organizations. It was a constant reminder that that was a lie. And that's why it became so important. In the African American tradition, the church was, that's why they called it Mother Bethel. Mother Bethel was one of the first churches in Philadelphia with the AME Church and others. It was a place where everybody was welcome, and the notion of family in the African American community is an expansive notion because of the history of slavery and also the history in Africa where a family was basically a clan, everybody who was related to you. And so for the church, for African Americans, they really bought into this notion of brotherhood. And it's not based on color or race or anything, it's a brotherhood. And if you come to the church, then the church's responsibility is to help you. And so, it was the whites that put restrictions on who could come to their church. African Americans always had an open door policy. And it's tragic that someone took advantage of it, but it's always been an open door policy for African Americans in churches. You don't see African Americans having rules saying whites can't join or whites can't be in leadership or whatever. That's not part of the African American religious tradition. I'm also a little concerned that there were, when you go to a church and choose people, it's not a place that you're going to oftentimes find a whole lot of African American men, which is why you probably saw a lot of women killed. But the fact that I don't think it was an accident that they chose that church and made sure that he was there and he was part of the one of the people who was killed. I don't think that's an accident. I think that I think politics always has to be a part of it, politics, race, and those other things. So we have to factor all those things in. There's several things I think we need to really step back. I mean, while we grieve the loss of these people, we need to grieve ourselves. What kind of society? I mean, the church is the one place where people had some respect. Even if you don't have respect for people, you had respect for the institution. But it's a long history that there's been this lack of respect for African Americans and their religious traditions. I mean, going back, even people look at the 60s, but even before the 60s, there was this notion that the church was not as significant in African American community. One of the things I think we need to take from this is that we really need to sit down and re-examine what is important to America. What are the institutions that are important? And then the other thing we need to do is the discourse. Why is it that this young man felt that after spending an hour in church, he had to pull out a gun and shoot people instead of just talking? Tell us, what don't you, tell me, what don't you like about me? I can tell you what I don't like about you. We can shake hands and go on. Why is it that you have to feel that you have to kill people? And that's part of the thing. The discourse, I think, has been so poisoned. And, I hate to bring it up, but the last 8 years, people have fed into that discourse. And, a lot of violence, a lot of attacks, and, you've seen it at schools and other places where traditionally you expect that not to happen. And so I think we really need to sit down and we need to figure out what is important to America and come to some agreements. And because we can't keep going on like this. The two societies, the way we have our two societies set up, it's going to tear us apart. I was really hopeful after the election of President Obama, but it seems like things have slowly disintegrated. And I think that's the one thing we really need to look at. What is important to us? What does it mean to be an American? What kind of discourse are we going to have?